Welcome to Buddha at the Gas Pump. My name is Rick Archer, and my guest today is Michael James. Welcome, Michael. Hello. Here's a short bio that Michael sent me. He said, between 1976 and 1985, Michael James studied the teachings of Sri Ramana under the clear guidance of one of his foremost disciples, Sri Sadhu Om. Together they translated into English all the original Tamil writings of Sri Ramana, and also Guru Vachaka Kovai, excuse my pronunciations, the most profound, comprehensive, and reliable collection of the sayings of Sri Ramana, recorded in 1255 Tamil verses, composed by Sri Muruganar, with an additional 42 verses composed by Sri Ramana, and various works of Sri Sadhu Om, such as Sadhanai Sharam, the essence of spiritual practice. Michael's principal interest is in the philosophy and practice of self-investigation, Atma Vichara, self-inquiry, as taught by Sri Ramana, and he has written a detailed book on this subject, Happiness and the Art of Being. It's a beautiful book. It's about 500 pages long. The introduction alone is about 65 pages or something, and so I must confess I haven't finished it, but I've really been enjoying it as far as I've gotten. Yeah. It's very, very rich with clarity and meaning in every paragraph. So lay it out for us, Michael. The basic premise, the way you start your book when you first begin writing it, is that the essential nature of creation is happiness, and in fact the title of your book is Happiness and the Art of Being. Yeah. So why is that, and how do we know that?
Well, it's not quite the essential nature of creation, it's the essential nature of the reality.
Okay.
It's the creation, the manifestation, which actually obstructs the happiness, because our essential nature, we are infinite, as they say in Vedanta philosophy, Satchidananda, that is being, consciousness, and bliss, happiness. And that's beginningless, endless, undivided, infinite. So that's our real nature. But we now have somehow got ourselves into a situation where we seem to ourselves to be a finite being, a body, and a mind that takes that body to be I, and this is what we take to be ourselves. And so we do experience happiness in little bits and pieces, mixed up with the opposite of happiness. We also experience a fair share of unhappiness or dissatisfaction in one way or other, and that is, we can never be fully satisfied, because our nature is infinite. We can't be satisfied with anything less than infinite happiness. And so long as we experience ourselves as a finite body and mind, we cannot experience infinite happiness. So when our nature is dissatisfaction, we're always dissatisfied. We seek one thing after another. When in material ways, we believe happiness lies in outside objects. But if we have a little better salary, or more wealth, or nicer friends, or something, we're always expecting something will happen in our life which will enhance our happiness. We're always looking for that happiness outside. But actually, according to Bhagavan, Ramana Maharshi, how we experience happiness, how we seem to experience happiness from external objects and external experiences, it's not that there's any happiness in those things per se, but when any desire or dissatisfaction arises in our mind is thereby agitated, and the more the mind is agitated, the more the happiness, which is our real nature, is clouded over. When a desire is satisfied, temporarily that agitation subsides, and a little bit of the happiness that is within as our real nature is manifest. So we feel a little bit of pleasure, and then again the dissatisfaction comes, and so we associate the pleasure with the external things which we think have caused that, and so we continue seeking happiness externally. What Bhagavan says is, actually we're never going to be satisfied in this way. We're always going to be dissatisfied. enjoy a little pleasure here and there. There's so many things which we enjoy pleasure from, but it's all very finite, very limited for pleasure. And it's limited in time, and it's limited also in the quality of the pleasure itself.
Magnitude, yeah, degree.
Magnitude,
yeah.
The degree, exactly. So if we want to experience the infinite happiness that is our real nature, we need to know ourselves. And for that, the principal means is self-investigation. Who am I? What Bhagavan called "Who am I?" Who am I? People sometimes take it to be a question, but it's not that we verbally or mentally ask ourselves, "Who am I?" Who am I denotes the investigation that has to take place. We have to investigate to find out what this I really is.
Yeah, I heard you use the analogy many times of if someone hands us a book and says, "What's in this book?" we don't just sit there saying, "What's in this book? What's in this book? What's in this book?" We open the book and read it. We investigate experientially what's in the book.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I'm sure we're going to talk at great length about the nature of the Atma Vichara, but regarding happiness again for a minute, I think most of the people listening to this probably agree intuitively with what you just said, and they've read books which have said that. Yeah. And I suppose, I'm just curious. I mean, as I was thinking about it, I was thinking, well, how do we know this? That the inner nature of life is happiness, and that it's not to be found in any permanent and substantial way in outer things. I mean, we experience that part of it all the time. Yeah. But how do we know that? I mean, we can take it on scriptural authority, and we can take it on the authority of great teachers like Ramana, like Bhagavan, who told us that. And but I think in addition to those two things, people have an intuitive aroma or intuitive sense that is true. They somehow, and maybe they have glimpses of it from time to time. So it's not just a vague intuition; it's an experience that they want to culture and make more stable and complete.
Yeah. Well, generally, even in our ordinary external experience, we associate peace with happiness. When our life isn't disturbed, when things are peaceful, calm, we are happy. But then our own mind rises and is dissatisfied and wants something more. But generally, nobody feels that the peace is suffering until the mind gets involved and gets bored and wants something more. But peace in itself is happiness. That is one clue we have. And when our mind is much agitated, we're usually not very happy.
Right.
It's the agitation of the mind. It's when the mind is calm, but we feel more happiness. That's one indication. Another very clear indication: every day we experience a state in which the mind is not active, namely the state of deep sleep, dreamless sleep. And in that state, we are calm, peaceful, and happy. I don't think anyone fears to go into sleep thinking they're going to be miserable in sleep.
Right.
Okay, we may sometimes get nightmares, but that's not
sleep.
That's a dream. But in sleep itself, I've not yet met anyone who's complained they're miserable in sleep. And the reason for that is it's the activity of our mind which is obscuring the happiness which is our real nature. When the mind subsides in sleep, we experience that happiness.
Yeah, so we all have these experiential clues then that a quieter mind equates with greater happiness.
Yeah. But we cannot actually prove that this is the case until we experience it ourselves.
Right.
When sages like Buddha or Bhagavan, so many sages have been there who have said that, who have basically taught us that infinite happiness is attainable, and we have to seek it within. To a certain extent, we have to take that on faith, because all we've ever experienced is finitude. We have never experienced anything, or as a according to the sage, actually we experience it all the time. But now we mistake ourselves to be a finite being. It seems to us we have never experienced anything infinite. So we have, to a certain extent, we have to take it on faith.
Yeah. But we can also take it as a scientific theory that we can investigate.
Exactly.
Yeah, hypothesis.
We don't have to blindly believe it.
Right.
In fact, Bhagavan never recommended anyone believe anything. He used to say, doubt everything. Doubt even the existence of the doubter. That is the mind. So it's in any learning process, a certain amount of trust in those who've gone before us. If we're learning some scientific subject, we don't automatically doubt everything that our teachers tell us. We take it on trust. Other people have investigated this; they have found this. We don't have to blindly believe it. We can take it as part of a learning process. We take it on trust. Okay, this is probably the case because other people have found that matter is actually composed of atoms or whatever.
But if we want to, we can get the requisite education and we can investigate that for ourselves.
Investigate it ourselves.
Right.
But the problem is with any external knowledge, there's always a chance that whatever we experience could be an illusion. We can never be sure of anything. In fact, if you want to take doubt to the absolute extreme, we cannot be sure there's an external world. We cannot be sure there's anything except I and what I am experiencing at this very moment. Even our memories, for instance, what I was doing 5 minutes ago, I'm not experiencing that now. I'm only experiencing a memory of that. And that memory is just a thought, an idea in my mind.
And even what we're experiencing now, I mean, we know that we're only experiencing a sliver of the electromagnetic field, and our senses can only give us a little pinpoint of what's really going on.
So everything is open to doubt, except I am. One thing that we cannot reasonably doubt is the fact that we exist. We may not know what we are, but we know that we are, because if we didn't exist as something, we couldn't be experiencing all this. So the one indubitable experience we have is I am. Everything else is open to doubt.
Have you ever heard anybody raise any intelligent objections to that assertion?
Well, there are philosophers who have, in Western philosophy, of course, everyone's heard of cogito ergo sum, Descartes saying, I think, therefore I am. There are philosophers who have said that they think he's asserting too much. All he can say is there is thinking. But actually, that's not our experience. Our experience when we think, we always think I think. We always experience it as I am thinking. At least, but thinking actually has two sides to it. When we think, we both produce the thought and we experience the thought. Even if we have set aside the producing of the thought and say thoughts just come, we cannot deny the fact that there is something that we call I, which is experiencing these thoughts.
And yet, there are plenty of spiritual people running around these days saying there is no I. I mean, you just said that's the one thing we can be certain of, but there are a lot of people who are out there saying there is no I.
Okay. Yeah. This is often taken to be a fundamental difference between Buddhism and Advaita. Advaita says I is the only reality. Buddhism says anatma. But I think this is very much a confusion in terminology, because actually the Sanskrit word anatma, or the Pali equivalent of which is anatta, doesn't mean no self. It means not self.
What's the difference?
If I say this is not a telephone, I'm not saying there's no telephone. I'm just saying I'm pointing to something and saying this is not something. One of the sayings of Buddha from the Pali Canon, which is often quoted as the authority for this doctrine of no self, so-called no self, is he said all dharmas are anatta. Dharma means dharma is a word which has many different meanings in different contexts, but basically dharma means it comes from a Sanskrit root which means to hold, dhru, and so it means what is holding together, or what is upheld. So it is some people interpret that everything that is constructed, everything that is formed or made is not self. And there's also a verse in the Pali Canon in which Buddha says, there is that which is unborn, uncreated, unchanging, I can't remember the whole series of it, but he gives a list of attributes saying that basically it is infinite, it is unlimited, it is not born. There is such a thing. If there were not, there would be no escape from birth, limitation, and all the other. I mean, he then lists all the opposites. So Buddha hasn't denied the existence of a reality. And if we are to experience that reality, if that reality is infinite, we are something that is finite. If we are something that is born, we cannot experience the unborn. So unless that reality is ourself, what we essentially are, it would be impossible for us to experience it. Also, this when we consider this this idea of no self, it's not very clear what it means actually, because when we say the self of something, there are not two things, a thing and itself. A self is what something is. If I say I myself, I'm not talking about two things, an I and some possession of mine called self. I myself, self is referring to what a thing is in itself. So to say something has no self is in effect saying it doesn't exist. So if anything exists, it has a self, because it is. I mean, because everything is its own self, if you get what I mean. So I think when, this is my understanding, when Buddha said that all dharmas are not self, anatta, he's not saying there is no self. He is saying all these, everything manifest, everything cognizable is, and even the cognizer is not the essence, is not what we essentially are. So, and it is not only actually in Buddhism that it is said there is no self. In a sense, it is said that like that in Vedanta. In Vedanta, it is said this body, this mind, all these things are not self. These are all unreal. There is no mind. It is an illusion. So there's actually a lot more common ground between Buddhism and Vedanta than is generally recognized. But philosophy in India is very, very ancient. Indian philosophy goes back at least 3,000 years and probably much before that. So, in India, the word for a philosophy is darshana. Darshana means a view. So always in any intellectual activity, there will be many views. So Buddhism is one view, Vedanta is another view. And people tend to, always in India there was a lot of debate between all these different viewpoints. And often in the course of debate, people tend to exaggerate differences in order to try and assert that my way is right. But according to Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi, all argument is useless, because we're not going to achieve anything by just, and ultimately all differences are mind created. If you want to know the reality, we have to go beyond differences.
Okay.
So it is true in a sense, but there is no self, in the sense that this, what we now take to be ourself, is unreal. It
Right.
is a mere appearance. But underlying this, for every appearance, there has to be some basis. If we see a rope lying on the ground in the half light, we can mistake it for a snake. The snake is an illusion, but there's some basis for that, for rope. If there wasn't a basis for something, there couldn't be an illusion. And as the basis for whatever illusion there is, or whatever illusion there is, there has to be something that is experiencing that. If there's absolutely no experiencer at all, there could be no illusion. So any illusion points to the existence of an experiencer.
So what we've established so far then is that there is an essential, self or essential nature to the mind or to life, which and that it's desirable to find that because it's a infinitely happy field of infinite happiness. There's some Upanishadic verse which says that contact with Brahman is infinite joy.
Yes.
So that sounds good. And so we want to investigate in whatever way we can to make that connection, to have that experience. And that's what Atma Vichara is all about, as I understand it.
It is, exactly. Because if it is true that happiness is what we really are, in order to experience that happiness, we have to experience ourselves as we really are. And in order to experience ourselves as we really are, if we want to know something, the primary tool we have for knowing anything is our power of attention. When scientists set out to know about faraway galaxies or to know about atoms or whatever they set out to know about, they may have so many instruments for telescopes for seeing faraway things, or microscopes for seeing small things, or even this accelerator that they have in
CERN.
In CERN, exactly. All they may have so many instruments, but without attending to that, they cannot get any knowledge from it. So our power of attention is our basic instrument by which we come to know anything. And to know things outside, we've got our basic instruments, our five senses, our eyes, ears, and things. But to know what we are, by using our senses, we cannot know ourselves.
Because our self is not some object.
Because our self is that which is experiencing things through the senses.
Right.
And we cannot use there's no instrument by which we can investigate what we are. The only tool we have to know what we are is our power of attention. Now, from the time we wake up in the morning till the time we go to sleep at night, and from the time one dream starts till the end of that dream, what we are doing constantly is attending to things that seem to be other than ourselves. Whether they're really other than ourselves or not, we don't know, but at least they seem to be. All these objects of the world seem to be different from myself. Even the thoughts that arise in my mind seem to be different from myself. I don't think I am this thought.
No, there's my thoughts. Therefore, there's a me and there's a thought.
Yeah, exactly. So we are constantly attending to things other than ourselves. As a background to all these things, whatever else we experience, we also experience I am, because it's always I am experiencing this. So there is a background of self-awareness underlying all our other experiences. But we tend to overlook that, not pay attention to it, and we attach more importance to other things. Like if we go to a cinema, we see a picture projected on the screen. We sit there looking at that screen for 2 or 3 hours, but we never actually see the screen. We are seeing the screen but not seeing it, because our attention is not on the screen but on the pictures which are moving on the screen. It's like that. The self-awareness is always there as a background, but we're constantly overlooking it because we are more interested. We find more more appeal in the external things, in the things that we're experiencing.
Yeah, let me interject a question here now.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll ask you 2 or 3 questions in a row, and then you can answer them. One would be: is this because the senses, by their very nature, their functioning, are outer directed? That's one question. Another question is: doesn't it seem odd that if the self is infinite joy, we should find ourselves so fascinated by everything other than the self? You know, it seems like that's where our fascination would lie, but it doesn't. And so we're like these, people who've won the lottery and don't realize that we're walking around multimillionaires begging on the street for pennies.
Yeah, exactly. Well, your first question about the senses, we shouldn't blame the senses. The senses...
they're doing what they do.
They're doing what they do. It's our attention which goes out through the senses. Mm-hmm. So it's because we, the mind, have so much taste in experiencing these external beautiful sights, sounds, or whatever. And even when we close our eyes, we continue thinking of these things in our mind. So we've got so much interest in the external world. That interest cannot be blamed on the self, on the senses. It can only be blamed on the mind, which has that interest in these things.
And do we really have to, in a way, use the word blame? Because without our attending to the external world, we'd all be sitting in the mud. I mean, we build ourselves homes and all kinds of conveniences.
Okay, I didn't mean blame in a negative way, but I mean if we are to attribute a cause to our going out
to our estrangement from the self,
it is our own interest, our own desire for these for experiencing these external things.
Mm-hmm. Let me interject to another question here to just throw into the mix and have you comment on, and that is that doesn't it seem that there's a natural tendency that the mind has, or the attention has, to seek greater happiness? And as you were saying in the very beginning, that attention is kind of misdirected in the sense that it's looking for happiness where ultimately it cannot be found. But nonetheless, if we're sitting here talking and some beautiful music starts, all of a sudden our attention will naturally shift to that without effort because it's charming. It offers greater happiness. So we're constantly following that tendency toward greater happiness. And perhaps that very tendency, which keeps the mind outer directed, could actually be used to enable it to become inner directed. If it could just take a correct turn, it would find increasing charm in the direction of the self.
Exactly. The more we practice being self-attentive, the more the mind will be drawn to that. Right. Now, when we start off, we are unfamiliar with that. Though there's always that background of self-awareness, we are unfamiliar with keeping our attention just dwelling on that self-awareness, away from all other.
There's a deeply ingrained habit to always have the attention outer directed, and it's through decades of experience, it's been deeply ingrained, and so we're kind of like we're on new territory when we try to turn it 180 degrees.
And also there's another reason why many people, when they start this practice, it's not just when we start. Most people complain that it's difficult. Even if they've been at it for many, many years, they still say it is difficult because the mind feeds on objective experiences, on experiencing things other than itself. It's attention to other things which sustains the illusion of mind.
And here the practice you're referring to is Atma Vichara.
Yes.
Self-inquiry.
When the mind turns its attention towards itself, because it actually, according to the experience of testimony of Bhagavan, Ramana Maharshi, there is actually no such thing as mind. The mind seems to exist so long as we're attending to other things. But if we turn our attention inwards and try to find out what this mind is, it dissolves, and all that remains is I am. Mm-hmm. Not the thinking I that we're now experiencing, which is the mind, but just the being I, the pure I. So the existence of the mind, the thinking I, is threatened by turning its attention southwards. The more the more it attends to things externally, the more the illusion of its own existence is strengthened. The more it turns its attention towards itself, the more that illusion begins to dissolve. So, because the mind, its nature is we experience ourselves as mind rather than saying the mind. We experience ourselves as mind, and we have a natural instinct, a natural desire for self-preservation. So long as we experience, because we experience ourselves as a body, we do everything we can to avoid danger to the body. We don't walk out in front of a bus because we want to preserve this body. When we're hungry, we eat. When we're tired, we sleep. We're doing so many things to preserve this body and try to keep it going for as many years as possible. And so also, just like we try to sustain this body because we experience this body as I, we try to sustain this mind because we experience the mind as I. And when we turn our attention inwards towards I alone, we find the mind is beginning to dissolve. And so we instinctively try to struggle for survival. And the easy way for us to survive as mind is to attend to other things. So the natural tendency of the mind is to try and go outwards, to continue feeding on external experiences.
Okay, let me throw in a question and a comment here. I would say that there's an even more fundamental natural tendency of the mind, which is to seek just to seek greater happiness. I mean, you could boil it down to that. And we're accustomed to finding that out externally, so therefore that's our habit, and that's what the mind tends to try to do. But if greater happiness could actually be shown to the mind, so to speak, in an inward direction, the mind would say, "Oh boy, let's go for that. It seems to be greater, and that's what I want is greater happiness."
Well,
now I've heard you say many times in your writings and your talks that the mind and body are interrelated. Like for instance, there was one talk where you said if you eat a few garlic cloves or maybe have a cup of coffee, your mind is going to be agitated because you've done something to the physiology that is going to cause the mind to change in its functioning. And I would suggest that when you start to practice Atma Vichara, and you're the expert on that, so don't let me put words in your mouth, that the mind is kind of settling down, or if you will, if I can use that terminology, and because again the mind and body are interrelated, the body settles down, the physiology settles down accordingly, and when the body settles down, what happens? It starts to purify itself. It starts to purge itself of, we could say, vasanas, deep impressions. And so when the body has settled down because the mind has settled down, then the vasanas start to be stirred up. Then that's correspondingly going to stir up mental activity again. And so we're going to start having all these thoughts. And so it's not like either aspect of it is unnatural. Both body and mind are following their natural tendencies, and it's a kind of really a collaborative process through over time can bring about a total transformation of both.
We can use the analogy of if you've got lots of very light particles.
Your voice cut out for a second there.
Tendency. Oh, sorry.
Repeat what you just said. If you've got lots of...
If you've got lots of particles floating in water, and they're lighter than water, so their natural tendency is to float to the surface.
Right.
So long as you're stirring the water, they'll be mixed in the water, and they'll be spread throughout the water. But if you allow the water to become calm, they begin to float to the surface. So also when we begin to experience the calmness by turning our attention towards I, all the lighter material in our mind, which is our vasanas, our old desires, which have been there for a long time, they begin to come to the surface.
Good analogy.
But what Bhagavan Maharshi says is normally these distract our attention away from self. But whatever distracts our attention, we're experiencing that, and we are there as the experiencer of that. So actually, we can divert our attention. He described it in words in terms of questioning. To whom is this experience? Who am I? And then turning our attention back in. But he doesn't mean we actually have to go through a questioning process. What he's trying to draw our attention to is every experience we have, every thought that rises in our mind, every feeling we have, every sight we see, they are there because I am.
Yes.
So we are always there. So we can if we train our mind properly, nothing becomes a distraction, but everything reminds us of our own existence. Mm-hmm. So if we cultivate this habit of turning the attention selfwards, I-wards, we will find it keeps on coming back again and again. Whatever experience is there, of course, it sounds a bit ideal when I say this. In practice, our mind keeps on getting dragged away and towards other things because we still have very strong vasanas. But by practicing this more and more, we can weaken those vasanas. We can weaken the vasanas to think other things, and we can increase what is sometimes called the satvasana, the liking just to be. And so the more we abide in that state of self-awareness or self-attentiveness, which is a state of just, it's not an activity, because an activity of the mind, when we think anything or attend to anything external, our attention is moving away from its source, which is ourself, towards something else. But when we turn our attention towards ourself, it's not moving anywhere. It's remaining in its source, remaining where it originates from. So self-attention is not actually an activity, it's a state of being.
But it does sound like a practice. I mean, it sounds like...
It is a practice, but
yeah.
It's a practice just being, not a practice of doing.
I see. It's an effortless practice.
Yes. Well, it's not exactly effortless because, well, it is.
Well, if there's effort, then there must be doing.
Okay. No. Because truly speaking, it is effortless because our nature is just being. We don't need any effort to be.
Right.
But because we have a strong liking to do, to think, to see, to hear, to all these things, withdrawing our attention from everything else seems to require effort.
Yeah.
So, but it's not an effort to do, it's an effort to be. It's an effort to just be. We don't need effort to be as such, because whether we're doing or not, we always are. But it's an effort to just be. That is, to be without doing all these other things.
There's a verse in the Gita, no effort is lost and no obstacle exists.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly.
And so it sounds to me like it's a sort of an effortless effort. It's in fact, there's a verse in the Vedas someplace that says, "Be easy to us with gentle effort."
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It is a very gentle effort, and that's another nice clue that Bhagavan gave about practice. He said, it is not like if a cow has run away from its stall. If you run after it with a stick, it's going to just run further away.
Right.
But if you come after it with some nice green grass, you can slowly tempt it back into its stall.
Yeah.
So also, our practice should be like that.
So what is the green grass in Atmamachara? What is it that we're using, so to speak, to tempt the mind, using the cow analogy, to come back to the self?
Well, each one of us may find different ways that work well with us. I mean, if we are of a devotional bent of mind, believing that God is that which is existing as I am, within us as I, if we firmly believe that God is I, that our love for God will draw our attention constantly back towards I, because we believe that is the real form of God. Though we may have images of God as Shiva or Jesus or Buddha or whatever external image we may have of God, that is not the true form of God. Even the name or form of Ramana, which devotees of Ramana are devoted to, that is not what he really is. He himself said Ramana is that which exists in the heart of every living being as I.
Sure.
So-
I mean, if all he was...
If we begin to associate the name of God, like if we're, so when we're Krishna Bhakta, and we love singing the name of Krishna, if we begin to associate Krishna, Krishna says in Gita, I am the self in the heart of every being. So if we begin to associate Krishna with the I within us, whenever we repeat the name Krishna, instead of our attention going out to an external form of a blue-skinned cowherd playing his flute, our attention will instead turn back towards I, because that external form of Krishna is just a temporary manifestation, whereas his permanent form is as I.
So in a way, what you're saying now... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So whatever form of God we happen to be devoted to, if we're Christian or if we're whatever we are, we can apply the same thing. If we really believe that God is that, Christ said in the Bible, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and the kingdom of heaven is within. In fact, he says, I think if I remember correctly, he said something like,
people will...
They say to seek it here or there, but lo,
Right.
the kingdom of heaven is within you.
Exactly.
Lo is a rather archaic English, but lo actually means look. He's not just asking. He's not just telling us the kingdom of heaven is within you. He says, look, see, lo, behold, the kingdom of God is within you. He's telling us to look within.
So what you're saying now seems to be a little bit more generous than what I heard you saying in some of your talks, because there you were kind of saying like anything other than pure Atma Vichara is a distraction because you're giving your attention to a mantra or to a god or to a this or to that. But now you're saying that these things can actually, if I understand you correctly, can actually be triggers to really accomplish what Atma Vichara is attempting to accomplish.
Exactly. I mean, this is what we were saying about the green grass for a cow.
Yeah.
Some people are naturally devoted to some name or form of God. And if they are convinced that the real form of God is I, they can associate that name of God, Krishna or Ram or whatever it happens to be, with the feeling of I within them, and therefore they can use that as a means to draw their attention back to I. That is just one possibility.
Sure.
Other people are not so much drawn to the path of devotion. They will find other ways. Maybe some people are more of a sort of a philosophical bent of mind, so they try and they want to know the truth. But and so it can be more clues on the path of knowledge of how do we know that anything is real? The only thing which is the basis of all our knowledge is I. So before trying to know other things, we should first try to know this I. I mean, there's so many different types of clues which can be given, which different clues will appeal to different people. Even to the same person, to each of us, there'll be different clues which appeal to us more at one time, other clues appeal to us more at another time. But these are all the most basic of all things. All of us, whether we are of a scientific bent of mind, philosophical bent of mind, or a devotional bent of mind, whatever bent of mind we are, one thing which we all share in common, we're all seeking happiness. So that is the most fundamental thing. If we are convinced that happiness lies within, or even if we are ready, even if we're not firmly convinced, if we at least think that it's an idea worth investigating, that again is the green grass. I mean, Bhagavan actually doesn't ask us to believe anything. He says, he gives us he says this is his experience, and he says if you want to know whether this is true or not, you have to find out, you have to experience it yourself. Simply knowing all the philosophy, knowing all these things, we can go on and on reading books, but it's not going to solve our problems. Our problems can be solved only by the direct experience of what we really are.
Important point. And it is kind of common these days for people to mistake an intellectual understanding of non-duality for the actual experience of it. But it's the understanding, even a fairly clear one, can be a far cry from the actual living experience of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when you say I'm an expert in self-inquiry, I don't claim to be an expert. I'm very ready to admit I'm still a seeker on the path. I'm still experimenting with self-inquiry. And I don't think anyone can be said to be an expert in self-inquiry until they've actually experienced the
self.
The goal, the self, yes.
Yeah, and I heard you mention that
Yeah.
if the experience is really 100% clear,
Yeah.
then that's it. I mean, you're done.
That's it. Just one moment of absolutely clear self-awareness, and the illusion is dissolved forever.
Yeah, but in the meanwhile, until that 100% happens, there can be many glimpses where it's a fair approximation. I mean, let's say you're walking in a fog and you see a tree, and you know it's a tree and it's not a horse or something, but you are seeing the tree, but it's not as clear as it could be.
So, I mean, even now, there's never a time when we are not experiencing the self, because the self is only I am. The trouble is, this I am is mixed up with so many other things, with body, mind, all these things. So we're trying to separate. Sometimes, one analogy that is often used is that it's like peeling layers off an onion. We go on peeling, trying to sift through all these things to get to the very center point. And when we get to the center, there's no onion at all.
Right.
There's no mind at all. There's only just being, self.
One thing that I kind of thought when I was listening to some of your talks is that the way you were presenting it anyway, it almost made it sound like self-inquiry, if you really want to get serious about it, it would be incompatible with many lifestyles. It would be incompatible with, being a stockbroker or running a big business or, even having 5 kids. You have to kind of live almost a reclusive life to devote your adequate attention to it.
That is not actually, it's not quite so. I mean, it's not actually incompatible with anything, because whatever we're experiencing, whatever we're doing, we always experience I am. So we can, in the midst of any activity, be practicing self-inquiry. It's not even necessary to be sitting with eyes closed or anything. We can be doing it, we can be holding on to a current of self-awareness, even in the midst of other activities.
So are you practicing self-inquiry right now as you're talking to me?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm practicing, but when we talk about this subject, the mere talking about this subject is drawing our attention towards I.
True,
So
but what if you're running a car dealership and you have to be selling cars all day long? Can you do that? And
well, as I say, I'm not an expert in this. I may be an expert in the theory of it, but in the practice of it, I'm no better than anyone else. I don't claim anything for myself. So I try is all I can say. I'm sure there are people who could do that, people who are very much more advanced than me in the practice, but my attention gets very easily distracted, I must admit.
Well, let me throw one thing in here, and that is that I would assert, from my understanding, that someone like Ramana, to take an ideal example, his maintenance of self-awareness is not accomplished in the least by him having to attend to it or think about it or hold on to it. Or it's just like breathing. It's
what he is.
It couldn't. It couldn't be. It couldn't be dislodged. It's solid, right? And I would suggest perhaps that to whatever extent we have attained that or established that, its attainment or its establishment it's kind of in our bones, so to speak. It's not going to be lost by not remembering it. It's not going to be gained by trying to remember it. Although we might devote periods of time when we do that. In terms of our 24/7 experience, there has to be a sort of an integration or a stabilization that just really is not dependent upon any little tricks we're going to play with our.
Well, that's true. The more we make effort to be self-attentive, the more we familiarize ourselves with that. And so we find it's almost without our being aware of it, we continue to be aware of it, if you see what I mean. That obviously is a meaningless statement I made.
No, it makes sense to me.
I'm just trying to convey it does somehow continue in the background in a very tenuous sort of way.
Yeah, or even not so tenuous, could be quite predominant.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it does get sometimes it's much stronger than at other times. But yes.
It's sort of like learning to ride a bicycle or something. When you're first learning, you really have to pay attention to it,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's very wobbly. But after a while, it's second nature. You never think about balance. It's just the way it is.
Yes. But coming back to your question about certain lifestyles may be incompatible with this, we can't say categorically that is so. But I think there is if you are in a lifestyle, if you say you're in finance or something, and your whole life is about amassing wealth, does seem to be a little bit incompatible with this, because in order to go within, we have to give up the external desires. They have to slowly. I mean, it's not even we have to consciously do it. They do. The importance we formally attach to external things, to having material wealth and things, they become less and less important as we go on. So I think it would be. It would be difficult living that lifestyle to practice self-inquiry. It's rather than practicing self-inquiry, it would be difficult to live that lifestyle.
Well, I mean, obviously, certain teachers like Shankara and others established lineages which were primarily taken care of by monks. And over time, the monastic orientation was emphasized. But obviously, in the scriptures, you find people like Arjuna, who is being told to realize the self, then fight this battle, or King Janaka, who was said to be an enlightened king, who had all kinds of kingly responsibilities and wives and children and armies and all this stuff he had to deal with. So it's not so much that these guys didn't have desires, but perhaps it was that the desire did not overshadow them, or did not cause them to get drawn out into a narrow focus to the exclusion of the self.
Yeah.
So maybe it's more of a challenge if you have a demanding lifestyle, or I don't know. Some would say it's more of it's actually more of an opportunity because it enables you to really ground it in the midst of any circumstance.
Bhagavan never attached any importance. Sometimes people used to say to him, "Isn't it necessary to become a sannyasi, a monk, in order to realize the self?" He said, "Just like marriage comes according to destiny, so also monastic status comes according to destiny. If that is destined to happen, you cannot avoid it. If it is not destined to happen, even if you seek it, you won't achieve it." So, in fact, he taught that our external life is shaped by grace. We are given the type of external life, the type of circumstances that are most conducive to us.
I love that.
We may think that if we go and sit in a cave and spend 12 hours a day meditating, that will be very conducive to our realizing the self. But it may not be so, because we may be sitting in that cave thinking so many other things. Whereas we may be in a worldly situation. We may have wife and children and be living in poverty and having to work so many hours a day. But that very circumstance may be giving us even stronger yearning to go beyond all these limitations and to experience the happiness that is within.
That's beautiful. So I love that.
We can't say for each one of us. And, again, this is something we have to take on trust, because there's no way I cannot prove this. I cannot give any logical argument to say that this is so. But on the testimony of Bhagavan, and I think quite a few other sages have also said this, whatever we are given to experience in our outward life is what is most favorable for us at that particular stage of our life.
It also points to the notion that God is omnipresent and merciful, and that there's a sort of an evolutionary tendency in creation. You know, because if if life were just really dead matter with no intelligence inherent in it, then everything is capricious and arbitrary, and things just, shit happens, as the bumper sticker says. But if it's all divine and permeated with the divine, then how could not every little instance be in our best interests?
If we talk all these things to someone who believes that, as many people do nowadays, but physical matter is the only reality, and that even mind and consciousness can be explained in physical terms.
Right.
What we're talking is gibberish.
Right.
But I think there are very strong reasons for doubting such a view. That everything can be explained in physical terms. I find that. I mean, I've read a lot of philosophical arguments of that type, and I find it singularly unconvincing. I think there's much stronger arguments to say that consciousness is the basis of all things.
I agree, and I think that those who espouse the materialistic perspective could actually be offered the hypothesis, as you said earlier, that that is not the case, and then given systematic procedures whereby they could investigate whether they're right or wrong. Chances are they're not going to be so open-minded as to do do but they, as well as anybody else, could experience that consciousness is fundamental, that the divine is governing the universe, and so on.
I mean, the spiritual path is basically it's a scientific investigation.
Very much so.
We've got a hypothesis. The hypothesis is that we are infinite happiness. Now we're testing that to find out whether it's true or not. It's exactly the same what the scientists are doing. They set themselves hypothesis and they test it.
Yeah, and earlier on you were mentioning, like, the Large Hadron Collider and various scientific instruments. Well, we've got a scientific instrument that is actually much more sophisticated than any of those. This is it, the human nervous system.
Exactly.
Even a single cell of the human nervous system is more fantastic than the Large Hadron Collider. So
exactly.
Use that instrument. One thing I found kind of interesting in what I heard you saying in one of your talks is that there's a certain notion in spiritual circles these days sometimes that you should give up the search, and that there's something kind of wrong or elementary or in being a seeker. And people say, oh, when I was a seeker, blah, blah, blah. But, you kind of alluded to various saints and sages who were ardent seekers, even though they were very well along on the path. And they had not given up the search by any means. They were just not satisfied with anything less than the totality.
We shouldn't give up the search until we have given up the searcher. So long as we, in other words, so long as we exist as a finite entity, everyone is searching. Even the ant, when it picks up a little piece of sugar and carries it, it is searching for happiness. Every person, even the drunkard, the drug addict, everyone is searching for happiness in one way or other. The debaucher is searching for happiness. Everyone is searching for happiness. We're all seekers. And it's seeking is our very nature. Until we attain the infinite happiness that we really are, we cannot actually give up seeking.
So why do you think that someone who is already really kind of highly enlightened, such as Ananda Moyama or Amachi or one of these great sages, would still be, would still have this fervent, vehement kind of seeking energy, even though they're well along on the path?
I think we can explain it in various ways. One is they could be not consciously, but they could be
setting an example.
Setting an example is one thing. Another thing is, it's if they are really in that state, they are not the body and mind that we see them to be. But that body and mind, before they attained that state, had developed tendencies of devotion and of yearning and of seeking. Those continue in the body and mind even after the person who was there has been dissolved himself. Ramana Maharshi sang hymns in praise of Arunachala, praying for jnana. Long after he had attained it, But it's that tendency just continues. I mean, that devotional tendency, which is probably there for many, many lives.
There's a quote from Shankara. He said, the intellect imagines devotion for the sake, the intellect imagines duality for the sake of devotion.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ramana set up this sort of dualistic relationship with Arunachala for the sake of devotion.
Yeah. But even while doing so, if you read the meaning of the verses, it's the duality and non-duality is interwoven. Mm-hmm. He keeps on. I mean, in so many verses, he's referring to Arunachala as the self, and one of the verses is Tirumbiya Handane Dinamaha Kankan Teriyamandrane and Arunachala. Oh, Arunachala, you taught me. Turning daily within, see the eye with the inner eye. The eye that is the capital I with the inner eye.
Yeah.
So I mean, the duality and non-duality is all woven together there. Mm-hmm. And in the very first verse, he says, "Oh, and actually, you root out the ego of those who meditate on you in the heart." As Arunachala, that in the heart, it has two meanings in Tamil. Who meditate upon Arunachala's eye, it can also mean.
What is he, when he mentions Arunachala like that, is he actually really referring to the mountain in South India, or is he referring to Lord Shiva, or is he referring to pure consciousness, or, why all this fuss about the mountain down there?
Both. He's referring to both. Because we now take ourselves to be a physical body, we have a form, and so long as we have a form, we cannot conceive God except as a form. We can know theoretically God is formless, but in order to have a relationship with Him as a person, we conceive Him as a person, as a form. So in that sense, but worshipping a hill, a mountain, as the form of God is in a way a very abstract form. Instead of worshipping God in a human form, it's a very abstract form. Though it's a very solid material thing. To take a mountain as God is a very abstract idea. But if you read his verses, in almost any of the verses, you can read two meanings into it. You can either read the meaning that Arunachala is literally the physical hill, also that Arunachala is I. And in so many places he's saying, I mean, he literally says Arunachala is I.
So is it with a lot of Ramana's teachings that you can tune into them on many levels according to your ability? The very same sentence or passage could mean
and
one
also,
thing or another.
It's not only there are times when I mean, for each seeker, our mind isn't in a constant state. We're not constantly of one. Sometimes we're more emotional, sometimes we're more rational. So there are times when that type of dualistic devotion may be helpful to us. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't get too caught up in that, because we should be remembering that all the dualistic devotion is ultimately has to come back to I, and but I is the real form of God. Yeah. So it's to suit different. Yeah, it is to suit different people at different stages of development, but it's also to suit one individual within the different states of mind that we go through during the course of our life.
Okay, so just to reiterate what you just said, basically, is, on the one hand, there could be a number of different paths, or, now we're broadening it out aside from just Ramana's teaching, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, even yoga, physical, hatha yoga, pranayama, all these different things have their significance according to your makeup, your nature, what you need at any given time. But also even, and so you could, in the world there are so many thousands of people in this and that and the other thing. But then also a single individual might go through stages or phases at which each one of these things becomes relevant at one time and perhaps irrelevant at another.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Or not even, it's not only, but we go through stages in our life, even within the course of
a day.
A day, we can go through we can be in different states of mind.
Sure. Just like at one point you feel like eating, another point you feel like exercising, another point you feel like sleeping. So same with spiritual practices, or okay.
Yeah, but now you brought up about other practices. I think there's just one thing I'd like to clarify here. Many people reading books of talks with Ramana Maharshi and those type of books, conversations, they think, oh, he approved all spiritual paths. That is true in a sense, but he didn't just say all paths are equal.
Right.
He said any path, any type of spiritual practice we do, other than self-inquiry, is a doing. It's an action. It's a karma. Only when our attention is turned towards I does all action cease and we remain in a state of being. So any other type of spiritual effort we make in the form of a spiritual practice is a karma, is an action. And he very clearly said, but action cannot lead directly to a goal, because the self, its nature is actionlessness. It is free of all action. So what any action we do, whether it's bhakti yoga, Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga, any of these things, they all involve action. And any action, it can purify the mind. And by purifying the mind, it leads us to the real path. It shows what the real path is. I mean, when I say real path, the ultimate path.
I think Shankara said something similar, which he said not all people are qualified for this highest teaching, but all these other things have their value insofar as they can purify. And
exactly.
There's that verse in the Gita. It says, because one can perform it, one's own dharma, though lesser in merit, is better than the dharma of another.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
So I mean, all these things, they. Ramana Maharshi approved all spiritual paths in the sense that some are suited for some people, some are suited for others.
Right.
And he,
did he feel that anybody and his brother could just sit down and do Atma Vichara, or did he feel like certain people really need to undergo some purification before they could really do it successfully?
He said anyone can do it if they want to do it, but there are some people who are just not. Some people are just not drawn to this path.
Right.
So,
could one be drawn and yet find oneself incapable of doing it successfully, and therefore have to do other things to become more capable? Or if you're drawn, you can do it?
Some people feel that, but I think that is actually not quite. It's not quite correct, that, because I think even if it's very difficult to measure our success. We may find that we keep on, whenever we try to attend to self, we keep on getting distracted, but the very effort to try, the mere trying is itself a step on the path. So every time we try, we are improving our ability to do it. So I think that it would be impossible to, it would not be correct to say, but it's impossible for anyone. But every person is aware of I.
Yeah.
Any person can.
You've probably heard the term.
A few moments on that near feeling I.
Sure. You've probably heard the term neuroplasticity, that when we do something, the brain actually changes as a result. And, so every little bit is changing the brain by degrees.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that if neurophysiology really had it figured out in terms of what to measure in higher states of consciousness and enlightenment and so on, and if they hooked up Ramana Maharshi to an EEG machine, they would see something remarkable. They'd see something a little bit quite different than the average person in terms of the way his brain was actually functioning.
Maybe I don't know that, because outwardly he lived a life. He lived a life just like anyone else. I mean, there are no outward signs of what his inward experience was. So, there were indications.
In a way, there weren't. Yeah,
in a way, but I mean,
he stood out as being kind of a different person.
Yeah, that's true. But coming back to what we were saying about other paths, there's some instances that happen that illustrate what his attitude towards other paths were. For instance, there's one story I heard. Someone complained to him, Bhagavan, this path of self-inquiry you teach is very difficult. Can I do meditation instead? And he said, yes, okay. And when that person went away, other people asked, Bhagavan, why did you tell him that it's okay to do meditation? Because you tell us that self-inquiry is the only way. And Bhagavan said, he says it's very difficult. He says he can't do it. What's the use of me telling him, no, you must do it? Because he obviously doesn't want to do it.
Right.
So he asked if he can do meditation. I say, yes, you can do meditation. Next week he may come back here and he may say, oh, this meditation is very difficult. Can I do japa? And I will say, what do I have to say? I will say, yes, you do japa. And then later he'll come back and again he'll say, this japa is very difficult. Can I do puja? So puja means worship, that is external physical worship. So I'll also say that I can't force people to do what they don't want to do. But if people come to me and ask me, I don't know what to do, what can I do? I will tell them to do this, because this is all I know. This is all I've ever done, he said.
So he's teaching from his experience.
He's teaching from his experience.
Now let's talk a little bit more about self-inquiry. I mean, I've heard of people doing self-inquiry and doing what you say not to do, which is sitting there saying, "Who am I? Who am I? Who am I?" Like a mantra or something. And that's not what he meant by it, obviously.
No.
But the actual subtle mechanics of what's taking place when a person is doing self-inquiry, it almost seems like at the very outset there's a dichotomy set up. There's this observer who is observing the I, but then again the I is the observer. So there's this kind of like, what's going on?
Well, it's particularly at the early stages, it's easy to think of it in terms of one eye attending to another eye.
Yeah, because the self is not an eye, it's not an object like any other object that you can look at, because you are that which is looking.
But actually, to find out what really another term that Bhagavan often used an English equivalent of a Tamil term that he used is self-attentiveness or self-attention, which is basically what self-inquiry is. It's we're just turning our attention towards I in order to know what it is. So, I was starting off to say something.
So you're saying self-attention. So let's say I'm sitting down to practice self-inquiry, and I'm just sort of like allowing my attention to be with the presence, which I know myself to be, and perhaps in doing that, I withdraw more and more from the senses, from mental activity, and that presence shines more and more brightly. I mean, is that a fair description of it?
That's a fair description, but yes, that is one way of describing it. What I was going to say is, the word vichara, it's often translated as inquiry, self-inquiry, but I personally prefer the word self-investigation, because it is inquiry, but it's inquiry in the sense of investigation rather than inquiry in the sense of questioning or anything. So
investigation has more of an experiential connotation, whereas inquiry has more of an intellectual connotation.
That's what I feel.
Yeah.
So I personally, and the meaning of vichara as it's used by Ramana, and he often uses it as a verb also. There's a verbal form of it. So we can't say to inquire we investigate I. You don't inquire I. We can inquire about I. It's a sort of roundabout way of putting it. So the word vichara means investigation, and I think it's there's a lot of significance in the choice of that word, because in a sense it is an investigation. It's a path of discovery, and if someone asks what is self-attention, we can give clues, but ultimately each one of us has to find out for ourselves. And when ultimately we do find out what is self-attention, when we find out what is pure self-attention, that itself is the goal. That is self-knowledge.
So what would you recommend to somebody?
In a way, our practice is we are learning the practice as we practice it, if you get what I mean. The more we investigate, the more we understand what the practice is, but not understand it in a verbal way, but understanding it experientially.
Experiential.
And sometimes when Bhagavan was asked by people how to practice self-inquiry, he used to say, you need to be shown the way inside your own house. The way is subjective, not objective, so it cannot be taught by one, it cannot be shown by one person to another. You have to go in and discover it yourself.
And so you would just, someone came to you and said, okay, well, I'm sold, how do I do it? You would just say, sit down, close your eyes, and just find out for yourself.
Find out for yourself. Try to, I mean, but there are so many clues that can be given, but we have to put those clues into practice. And as we put them into practice, we ourselves find out our ability to do that, our ability to focus our attention on our mere being, on our mere I, gets refined as we practice more and more. We discover more and more about it as we go along.
It's almost, again, like learning to ride a bicycle. You can't, explain in so many words how to balance. You just have to get on it and try to experience it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Huh. Interesting.
So we're all learners on the path.
Yeah. When you give talks, and I mean, I haven't read your whole book, but there is probably no chapter in the book, or is there, in which you actually say, okay, here's what you do, step 1, step 2, step 3.
No, because there is only step 1, which is to turn your attention to I. The whole, it's a big book, as you've seen, 500 pages. You know, in a sense, that's all unnecessary. It can all be said in 1 or 2 words. But it is, what I'm doing in that book is seeing the same subject from so many different perspectives, as Bhagavan has done in his teachings. But in his teachings, it's much more in seed form. I have just expanded those seeds according to my own limited understanding and a little bit of practice that I've done, and I put there how I understand it, and some people find it useful. Some people have told me, oh no, it's a terrible book, it's you're so intellectual. So I mean, it's not for everyone, but for people who are of a, I suppose people who have a similar bent of mind, or sort of inquiring bent of mind, possibly a more philosophical bent of mind, it does appeal to some people. It doesn't appeal to other people. So
well, I'm enjoying it. I mean,
it's there for those who want it.
Yeah. I wouldn't consider myself an intellectual or anything, but I think it's very clearly written, and there's a lot of there's a lot of knowledge in each little paragraph. So you could even just read a page, before going to bed or something, and it'll last you 2 years at that rate.
And I think what I have, I think if you open almost any page of the book, you will find that I'm dinning in the same message there. If we just have to practice. It's all we can understand it from so many different perspectives, but this understanding is useless if we don't actually try to experience it.
Just for fun, let's use your chapter titles as springboards for little discussions, and spend another half an hour or so just going through some of the points. So, for instance, I think we've already covered this, but let's not spend 20 minutes on each one because we won't get through them. But in a nutshell, chapter 1, what is happiness? And I'm sure you'll answer this with reference to Ramana. Yeah.
Well, that's really how we started off today's conversation. And the reason why I started the book with that chapter is one of the most important works of Ramana is a small essay called Who Am I? Which was originally questions and answers asked by a devotee called Shiv Prakasham Pillai. And later, Shiv Prakasham Pillai published it as a small book, and then Bhagavan himself rewrote it as an essay. And when he rewrote it as an essay, he added a one paragraph at the beginning, which wasn't part of the original question and answers, in which he says, I'll just tell you I'll just read it, the meaning of it to you. Since all living beings desire to be always happy and devoid of misery, since in everyone the greatest love is only for oneself, And since happiness alone is the cause of love, in order to attain that happiness, which is one's own true nature, that is experienced daily in dreamless sleep, which is devoid of a mind, knowing oneself is necessary. For that, jnana vichara, that is investigation of consciousness, we can say, jnana vichara, who am I, alone is the principal means. So he added this paragraph in order to start the subject from the point of happiness, because that's one thing which, as I was saying earlier, whether one is of a devotional bent of mind, or a scientific bent of mind, or philosophical bent of mind, or whatever bent of mind one is, we're all seeking happiness. So this is a sort of a good starting point, suitable for everyone.
Okay.
So
good.
in the same spirit, I started the book with that chapter, What is Happiness? And a lot of what a lot of the ideas that I wrote in that chapter is in a way, it's an expansion. There's another book called The Path of Sri Ramana. It was originally written in Tamil, but the English translation, Path of Sri Ramana, by Sadhu Om. And he starts in the same way. He's actually the first 2 or 3 chapters of his book are about happiness.
It's a good place to start.
In a way, that's what I've written in that chapter is an expansion of a lot of the ideas which are in seed form in his book, which in turn are an expansion of what is in seed form in this first paragraph.
Okay, so the second chapter is who am I? We've talked about this quite a bit already, and obviously the average person, if you ask them that question, they say, well, I'm Rick Archer, and I live in Iowa, and I do this job, and I have this wife and this house and these dogs and all this stuff, but that has nothing to do with who you are. So is it possible to actually answer the question, who am I, in so many words?
No, it's not possible. But what it is possible to do is to say what we are not. So basically that chapter maybe would have been more appropriate to say what am I not as the title of that chapter, because it's basically it's explaining why we are not why we cannot be either the body or the mind.
Okay.
I can say in a nutshell what it is. We experience 3 states. Generally people think of sleep as a state of unconsciousness. But actually sleep is not a state of unconsciousness. It's a state in which we're not conscious of the mind or body or world, but we are conscious of our being. When if it was a state of absolute unconsciousness, we wouldn't be aware of sleep at all. Like when a film is projected on a cinema screen, there's so many frames per second, 25 or 20, 30 frames, whatever the speed is, and between those each frame there is a gap. But because but we're not able to grasp that gap, so we see a constantly moving thing because our eye isn't grasping that. If we were not able to grasp a gap between waking and dream, or between one waking state and another, or between one dream and another, we would be aware of only 2 states, waking and dream. But we are clearly aware that there's another state. It's not just the 2 states we're in, we're also in another state. And when we wake up from sleep, we can often say, oh, I didn't have any dreams, I was sleeping very peacefully. So we are aware, but we were in a state. So we couldn't have been aware, but we were in some state devoid of dream, devoid of any thought or anything, if we were not experiencing that state. So even sleep is a state of consciousness, but not a state of consciousness of anything, but just consciousness of just being, consciousness of I.
And incidentally, when the consciousness really wakes up to itself in terms of enlightenment, or if we want to use that word, then it shines brightly, so to speak, throughout the night. Throughout sleep. It's not blotted out by the dullness of sleep as it is for most people. So someone like Ramana, I'm sure that pure awareness was maintained clearly 24 hours a day.
Yeah, well, in a sense, yes. That's from our perspective, but from his perspective, there was no 24 hours, no day, no state. No, I mean, these states in our experience. They're the basis, which is consciousness, and in that consciousness, these states pass by. waking passes, dream passes, sleep passes, and well, they're alternating states, but they're all experienced by the basic consciousness there is.
Right.
So why I say that, because it's quite important to understand that sleep is not the state of absolute unconsciousness, but we often imagine it to be, and it's often spoken of. So if we accept the state that sleep is a state that we actually experience, and we couldn't experience if we weren't conscious there, that's the basis of the argument. Then there's a simple principle in philosophy, but a principle of identity. But if two things are identical, whatever is true of one must be true of the other. So if we are able to experience ourselves without experiencing the body, we cannot be the body. So we experience this present body in only one of our three states. In dream we experience another body. In dream we may experience having an accident, losing an arm. But
flying through the air, whatever.
Yeah. So many things. So it's not the same body.
Right.
That body in dream is a mental projection. So also, according to Bhagavan, even this waking body is a mental projection. The whole of this world is just another dream. But whether people are ready to accept that doesn't really matter. The point is, we're able to experience a state where we're experiencing ourselves, we're experiencing our I, but we're not experiencing this body. Therefore, this body and I cannot be the same thing. They're two separate things. Because we're able to experience I in the absence of this body, or in the absence of any awareness of this body. So also we cannot be the dream body, because we experience that only in dream, we don't experience it in waking or in sleep. So what is common to waking and dream is the mind. It's the same mind, though it experiences different bodies as I in each state. It is the same mind that experiences waking and experiences dream. But this mind, as we now experience it as a thinking entity, is absent in sleep. So since we can experience ourself, our being, in the absence of mind, we cannot be this mind either. So that, in a nutshell, is what I say in that chapter. I elaborate upon it a lot more, and I give more arguments about why sleep is a state of consciousness and everything. But that's the essence of it.
Very systematic.
Yeah.
Now I have a question, but it might come up in one of these other chapters as we go through them, and so let me just ask it anyway, so I don't forget.
Yeah.
And that is that I heard you often say that the world is a sort of a projection of the mind, or a creation of the mind, or something like that.
Yeah.
But obviously it would have to be the creation or projection of a more universal mind. And let me tell you what I mean. I mean, we've been speaking about dreaming, for instance. 7 billion people in the world, let's say, and they all dream every night, but none of them know what the other has dreamed. It's sort of in their own little world. But when they wake up, they could all wake up and they could all look up and see the moon. So there's some kind of objective reality to the moon that's not. And if some of them die, as people do every day, or are born, it doesn't mean the moon is somehow dying or being born. There's a kind of an objective reality which has a consistency that doesn't seem to that is kind of broader or independent of pure individual subjectivity.
Okay. Well, we now take this world to be as it appears to be, because we now experience ourselves as a body, which is part of this world. So as real as this body is, so real must the world be. The body cannot be real in the absence of the world being real. Both are of the same level of reality.
So you're saying if the world isn't real, then the body isn't real. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay.
And so we now experience this body as I. Because we experience this body as I, we experience the body as real. And because we experience this body as real, we cannot but feel the world is real. But it is as it appears to be. That is how it seems to us to be. But the world is there as external world, concrete world, and in that world there are many people. So those people seem to us to be like us, to have minds, to see the same moon that we see, to have the similar experiences to the experiences we have. But in dream, we also see a world with many people in it. And if we were having this discussion in a dream, if you called me on Skype tonight in your dream, and we have this discussion, we will be saying the same thing. You'll be saying to me, see, in this world, there are 7 billion of us, and we all see the same moon. So does that not show that this world is not the projection of my individual mind, but it's a projection of some universal mind? We can apply, you can make exactly the same argument in dream. And to you in dream, it will seem as convincing as it seems now in waking. So how can we be sure that this waking state is not just another dream? That all these people are not... It doesn't seem so. It will always seem to us when we are in dream, the dream seems real. Only when we wake up does the dream, are we firmly convinced, oh, that was just my imagination. Those people didn't really exist there.
Well, I agree. I mean, Shankar referred to the world, waking state, as the long dream, or ignorance as the long dream. But and so, you know, in the sense that anything that in this apparently real world, such as this glass, can be, you know, if you look closely enough, as a physicist, let's say, it can be reduced down to pure nothingness or pure potentiality without any physicality to it whatsoever. It's a dream. But what I'm saying is that it's strange. I mean, there's this point that, you know, bring 10 people into this room and they all see a glass. Have 10 people go to sleep in this room and they're not seeing the same things in each other's dreams. There seems to be some sort of... And another point, let me just throw this in. If I am the creator of the world through my ignorance or whatever, through my projection, I am one heck of a creator, because even one little cell in my fingertip is this marvel of intelligence and, you know, complexity and fantastic thing. You know, and I couldn't possibly create a housefly or what to speak of an entire planet or a galaxy or anything else. So there seems to be a much larger intelligence of which, from which the whole universe is projected or expressed, and we're just little pinpoints of, we're just little aspects of that projection, and that's what we are. But we mistake ourselves to only be this, to only be the, you know, the hand mistakes itself to just be the fingertip or something. That the individuality is gained at the loss of universality.
Okay. Leave that aside for a moment. Let us think about dream. In dream, we know now we're in waking state. We know that what we dreamt last night was just our mental projection. But while we were dreaming, certain experiences were happening. Some of them may have been pleasant experiences, some of them were not, may have been unpleasant experiences. But we couldn't just at will change those. We couldn't suddenly change the world just by wanting to. It seems that we are constrained within that world that we're experiencing in dream. One difference that appears to be there from our waking perspective between dream and waking is that dream is often a very fluid state. We're 1 minute in one place talking to one person, and the next minute we're talking to the same person, but they have become someone else, and the place has become something else. There's a sort of it's a more fluid, it's a more malleable state. But that is not so in all dreams. In some dreams are remarkably, even after waking up, we say, oh, that dream it seems so real, because it somehow seemed more consistent than other dreams. That's our view from a waking state. But this difference between waking and dream, there's, I think, actually in one of the, Bhagavan translated some of Shankara's works from Sanskrit into Tamil. And one of those works was a small work called Drikdriti Avivika, the discrimination between the seer and the seen. And in that, Shankara gives one explanation why dream appears less substantial than waking. That is, in waking we are more strongly attached to this body, so that makes the state seem more consistent. To the extent to which we are strongly attached to a body in dream, to that extent that dream state resembles waking, and to the extent that it's a very fleeting, tenuous attachment we have to that body, to that extent that the dream keep on changing scenes. So that's one explanation for that. But let us say that in a dream, which is a dream which appears very much like this waking state, as some dreams do, but things seem consistent, we are not able in such a state, in such a dream, to change things at will. I see a red brick house there. I can't suddenly decide, oh, I want it to be a stone house instead. It will continue to be a red brick house, even though I think to myself I would like it to be a red brick house. Just like in the waking state, we can't change the projection at will. In dream, we also can't change it at will. That is because in dream, we are not experiencing ourselves as the one who has projected the dream. Because we experience ourselves in dream as a body within that dream, we do not experience, though we have projected that dream, we do not experience ourselves as a projector, but as one of the people within that projection. The one who has actually projected that is the person who is sleeping, not the person who is it. It is the same I, but because as soon as we project that world, we then identify ourselves as a body within that world, and then we get caught up in that world, and we are bound by the world as it is. We can't just change it at will.
Okay, so what you're saying is that...
Similarly,
okay, go ahead.
in the waking state, we now feel, I can't suddenly decide, Paris is in America, New York is in India. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, things have a certain rigidity or solidity.
It has a certain rigidity. That is because I am part of this projection in waking. It is my own projection, but I am now not experiencing myself as a projector. I am experiencing myself as one of a projection, this body. So,
and even if you were experiencing yourself as the projector, you couldn't make Paris be in New York or something. I mean, Ramana, the world was as it,
Who is the projector of this world? It's this, is God.
Right.
But what is God? God is only our own self. But he's one layer, just like the one layer below the dreaming person is the sleeping person who is projecting the dream. One layer below this, there's someone else who projected this world. That is, we call God.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah.
I mean, because when you say that the world is a projection of when there's any kind of implication that the world is a projection of the individuality, it's problematic, because obviously there's a certain stability or structure to the world which seems independent of individualities. But if the world is a projection of God, it's not a problem. That would account for the stability and the regularity of the reliability of the laws of nature and so on.
But God, who has projected this world, is not anything other than ourself.
Right. Agreed.
In a sense, we can say that our sleeping self is God as the creator. But in Hindu mythology, the creating function of God is actually considered as it is the function of God that is least revered of the three.
Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva.
It's Brahma who has created this world, but nobody worships Brahma. In no temple is Brahma worshipped. So because he's a sleeping fellow who's projected this world.
Huh. Yeah.
So that is why, though this world, actually we are the one who has projected this world, we have projected it, and within this world that we projected a body which we now experience as ourselves. So we now experience ourselves not as the one who has created this world, but as a creature within this world.
So awakening or enlightenment really means waking up to the realization that I am that from which the whole universe arises, or appears to arise, when in fact it actually doesn't. But
no,
it's not like the individual gets enlightened.
It's even further than that.
Okay.
Not only the individual gets dissolved in the clear light of self-awareness, even the projector, even Brahma gets dissolved. In fact, all gods get dissolved, and only being remains.
And yet, the apparent individual still engages in the apparent world. Ramana liked to read the newspaper and listen to the radio. Probably he was following the events of World War II. You know, maybe that concerned him, and so on. So there's just sort of still a participation in the play, even though one realizes the ultimate insubstantiality of it all.
He said all this is in whose view? He said, I don't say I have a body or mind. It's you who say I've got a body or mind. It's in your view, but I am this body or mind. But my experience is I'm not this body or mind. In fact, there's no body or mind in my experience. I just am.
But the apparent body or mind
the apparent body
had its apparent interests and personality traits and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
Okay. Good. Well, you and I could go round and round all day, I'm sure, with this. But maybe we shouldn't. Well, P.T. Barnum, whom you may know as a great American showman, said, "Always leave them wanting more." So perhaps we should wrap it up and leave them wanting more.
We've got through, I think, 2 chapters of the book. So.
Yeah, they can buy the book and they can read the rest of it.
Exactly right.
Okay, good. Yeah. So this has been a joy, Michael. Let me make a few concluding remarks. Thanks for this conversation. It's getting dark there, I can see. And your smoke detector needs a battery, by the way. That little beep that happens every now and then.
Okay, right.
It's funny. I had this friend and I were teaching meditation in Detroit, and living in this little house. And every morning at 4 a.m, this beep would start. And the reason is that batteries get weaker as they get colder. So around 4 a.m, the beep would start. We'd get out of bed. We'd be crawling around on our hands and knees. Where is this beep coming from? And finally we realized it was the smoke detector. It needed a battery.
Okay, right.
Anyway, thanks for this conversation. Thanks for your beautiful book. It's I think it's kind of a keeper. You know, it's the kind of book people could get and then just read in little bite-sized pieces over time. Yes. And it's really a beautiful work and very very clear. And if you want to familiarize yourself more with Ramana Maharshi, it would be a good one to read. And I think even the very instruction you gave, or the very point you made, that self-inquiry doesn't mean walking around all day saying who am I, who am I, who am I. Hearing that might save some people from doing the trouble of doing that. Yeah. So great. So those who would like to find out about, get in touch with Michael or read his book or listen to some of his YouTube videos and all those things, all those links to those things will be on his page in batgap.com, as is the case with all the interviews I do. And this is an ongoing series, so there are about 180, almost 190 other interviews archived there, which are listed both alphabetically and chronologically. So feel free to explore and check out other ones if you wish. You can sign up for an email newsletter to be notified every time a new interview is posted. There's a discussion group that springs up around each interview, which sometimes gets pretty lively. So there'll be one exclusive to Michael's interview. And there's also a general discussion area for people who just want to chit-chat and post YouTube videos about their favorite songs or whatever. There's a donation button, which I appreciate people clicking if they're able. It enables me to devote as much time to this as I actually do. And there's a link in every interview to an audio podcast in case you don't like to just sit in front of your computer and watch things, but you'd like to have it on your iPod and listen while you drive or whatever. You can subscribe in iTunes to the audio podcast. So thank you very much, those who are listening and watching, and thank you very much, Michael. And we'll see you all next week. Next week it'll be Thomas Hübl, who's a German teacher of spirituality. I've just started listening to his talks, and he sounds like a very interesting guy. So we'll see you next week. Thanks.